Okay.
Peter's actually spoken at one of our town halls.
A friend and a fan. Yes, I know he has. Yes.
Awesome. So welcome, Montessori leaders. We host these town halls weekly as a space for Montessori administrators, heads of schools, or just leaders to come together and discuss different school leadership topics. We know that it can get a little bit lonely when you're at the top, and it's great to have a support network. We like to take requests for different topics, and staffing and talent acquisition has really probably been one of the most requested topics throughout the past year, if not even longer. So we're really fortunate today to have a speaker to talk to that. So you'll notice that you guys are all muted when you come in. Feel free to use the chat to ask questions, or if there's time for questions at the end, you can unmute yourself as well. We really encourage participation. This is an opportunity for you guys to connect with not only our speaker and just to have a good time to gather great advice, but also to connect with other heads of schools and find a support system. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Letty Rising, who's going to be talking about talent acquisition for Montessori schools. So Letty, I'll let you take it from here.
Hello there. My name is Letty Rising, and they gave me the option to introduce me or let me introduce myself. So I just I guess I'll introduce myself. So I am elementary trained. So I started out as a Montessori elementary teacher. I quickly moved into a head of school role, but I was also a dual teacher and head of school for a few years off and on. So that's a little crazy, as you might imagine. And I have continued working with schools in a variety of capacities. Right now I'm doing about 8 different things, and I won't list them all, but the thing that probably takes the lion's share of my time is I am a elementary trainer for the Prepared Montessori Institute, which is a wonderful training program. I also do some online courses with Trillium Montessori. I consult for various schools, private and public. I started a charter school homeschool Montessori program this last year that I am semi-leading. And I work with my daughter on her Montessori laboratory science program. Those are just a few things, but so a lot of my time is spent either training, writing, or consulting for schools, and I'm pretty busy, and I'm hearing about all of these challenges from the people I work with. And so when they asked me if I wanted to talk about it, my response was, I don't really think I have any magic silver bullet solution at all, but I am a divergent thinker, and I've been talking to people and hearing lots of different things. So I'll just share some of my thoughts and ideas. And, we have such a small enough group where this could be kind of dialogue style, but I'll kind of lead in with some of my thoughts and we can kind of go back and forth. So this conversation would look a little bit different if we were in pre-pandemic times about staffing, because, it's always been challenging because schools operate on very thin margins on how to appropriately staff and retain schools. But, the beauty of our time, if you can find a silver lining, rather than a silver bullet, is that, what's happened has taught us to be more creative thinkers. And there's been a lot of creativity and ingenuity in the Montessori world. And Montessori is a pedagogy that's rooted in adaptation. And so just as, our teachers have been sort of forced to adapt their classroom practices while hopefully still staying in alignment with Montessori practice, as school leaders are going to have to adapt some practices as well. So I recently bought a house, and I have to tell you, it was really a challenging process because right now it's a little bit crazy. And just like it is a seller's market in real estate, right now it's an employee's market in the workforce. So the employees are moving about. They are, if they're not happy somewhere, they will change. We have people leaving the teaching field entirely. And so this involves sort of a different orientation when it's an employer's market and you have, 50 applications to choose from for that assistant teacher, because we don't really have that right now. And because it's an employee market, we have to look at a variety of ways we can draw employees into our school communities, ways to entice them. And I actually wanted to start from sort of the very beginning of this, which is the job advertisement. So you want to get rid of the notion of using your job description as your job advertisement. They are not the same thing, actually, but some people just kind of maybe add a line or two and then throw the job description into a job advertisement and think, oh, one and done, that's super easy. That would have maybe been fine before, but you really kind of need to think of hiring teachers similarly to bringing prospective parents into the school. And this is something I've just talked about with Camilla right before we popped on, actually. You have to, you are not putting a list of what you want from them and all the duties that they need to be doing. You actually have to create a job advertisement that's about what you have to offer them. That is like a little bit of a different orientation. And you may think, well, I don't really like that very much. But that's okay. It's not really about that. Unfortunately, it's about, you bringing people into your school. So it's about what you have to offer them. And, what do you have that sets you apart from other schools that make them want to work with you? Like, you really want to highlight that, tell them about the community that they're going to be a part of. Is your school on several acres of wetlands? Then tell them all about that. I mean, you might take for granted some of the really cool aspects of your school that will draw a guide or an assistant guide to want to work in your community. So look at your own environment with fresh eyes and look around and see, what is it about this place that makes us special and unique that would make somebody want to come here? Maybe your school is in the heart of an urban oasis and there's lots of wonderful restaurant options for foodie people, and so you can put that there. You want to write an enticing sort of job advertisement and tell them all the great things that you have. So that's the beginning, bare bones of it. Is you need to talk about what you have to offer them. Do you have a great, a warm community? Do you have special events or activities that, because a lot of teachers aren't just looking for a job, because, this is not a profession where people are making lots of money. So they have to have other reasons to want to be doing this. And one of their big reasons is finding a community. And sometimes it's even a community for their own children and their own family, because they might have children of their own that they're looking for a school. And so they're going to want to have a top-notch school for their children, and they're going to be very discriminating on where they're choosing to work. You also want to think about where you're advertising. So there's lots of places you can advertise online. I'm just going to list a few, and I'm sure you probably know these places, but it's worth repeating again. I don't know if you know of Teach Montessori. They are a free website where you can, it's geared towards public Montessori, but they have public and private advertisements there. It's free for everybody. It's for posting, for searching. Although I think they do accept donations, so they're probably always happy to get those, but it's free. And it can also be a place to look for training centers and other information and stuff. There's Indeed.com. A lot of people are always thinking, oh, we're Montessori schools. I want to do the AMI website, the AMS website, Teach Montessori, but you want to expand out of that Montessori bubble, because there are people looking on these non-Montessori sites. Sometimes a husband is getting a job somewhere and he's making a move, and they're wanting to move, and he's looking around. He's like, oh, there's a Montessori job in this area for you. Yay. So Indeed, LinkedIn is another good place, obviously. There's also a site called Montessori Jobs All Over the World on Facebook. And the thing is about that site, there's lots of people on there, but it tends to be an international focus. If you are a school that can provide visas, like J-1 visas for your school, I mean, that's really an amazing opportunity for somebody to come to this country who might be interested in. And some schools have found a lot of success in finding people from other countries because it's not been as easy to find people here who are wanting to fill some of those roles. And so that's another idea. Another thing you'll want to do, I know Peter will laugh when I say this because we've talked about this before. He's shaking his head no, but you might want to join some Montessori Facebook groups if you haven't already, and contribute in those groups and be a presence in those groups. And so when you do have a job advertisement that you happen to share, people might be really drawn to that because they feel like they know you. They have seen you say something thoughtful in there and contribute in there. So there's like, you know, something that you're going to, you know, you're giving a little bit at the front, but it kind of pays off down the road later on, because then you have a presence and people know you and they trust you. And they're like, oh yeah, she has given some great wisdom. I know that has got to be an amazing rock star school. I definitely would love to go there. Then there's interviews. So, you know, here we are, it's the beginning of March and everybody knows it's hiring season and you're frantically trying to fill roles. Raise your hand if you have roles to fill, multiple roles to fill in your school. Yeah, I think that pretty much everybody does. It goes without saying, that's where we're at right now. So you're going to want to schedule those as soon in the year as you can. So ASAP, have that process be seamless and smooth for the candidates. And the one thing I really want to stress, this is from me talking with lots of schools that I've worked with and people and whatnot. If you don't hire somebody, don't ghost them. Don't just like sort of disappear and not respond to them. The Montessori community is very small, and you don't want to give yourself the reputation of being that school that doesn't get back to people and doesn't respond to people. And so if if a school doesn't do that and then there's people talking, then you can get the reputation of, oh, it's that school who doesn't get back to you, kind of a thing. And so even the most miserable of interviewee deserves a prompt. I'm sorry, I know that's an excessive word to use, but deserves a prompt and polite thanks, but no thanks. And, so that's really important. It's a grace and courtesy thing too. If you're still deliberating on somebody, you don't want to let them get away, but like maybe you have like another interview and you're waiting, but you're feeling that stress and that pressure. So you want to maybe send them a quick note saying you need a little bit more time to finish wrapping up those interviews, but you will be with them. You will get in contact with them on Friday or Monday or Tuesday. So you're going to want to let them know that the conversation is coming really soon, whatever that may be. Just keep them there. Like if you're still thinking and you don't get back to them for a week because you're like, oh, we're still figuring it out, you're going to lose people. So you want to make sure to keep that channel of communication open. Also, in the interview, this is more of a retention effort, but make sure you're giving them the good, the bad, and the ugly in those interviews, so there are no surprises. The more you tell them about the great things about your school, but also share the challenges that you face as a school community, the less likely they're going to be surprised. If they come into the job and they find out later on that XYZ is happening and it's kind of a big deal to them and they didn't know about it, that's going to start with mistrust right off the bat. And that's not going to bode well for them wanting to stay with you, or they might become one of those employees who's complains to other people on campus and sort of creates a low morale and does not add to the harmony. So you want to make sure to, in your interview time, I always think of the interview time as kind of a sensitive period for the employee, for them to be really taking stuff in and cementing that. So what you whatever you want, need, and expect of them, like that's a really good time to like let them know, how things are going to be, so that they will be more likely to stay with you and not quit after a week or 2 weeks. I mean, I know schools that have been so desperate to get people in that they have, withheld some important information, just hoping that it's going to work out, like that, once they get here, I know this is an issue, but I just need to get their foot in the door. I'm telling you, it backfires. So just be really careful with that. When you are onboarding them, be sure to orient your staff, set them up for success from the very beginning. Treat your assistant teachers really well, give them lots of orientation too, because they may be your lead guides one day. You might be hiring a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old fresh out of college, and they may seem like they are pretty young and green and inexperienced, but after a year with you, you might be surprised at how much they grow with you and your staff and your organization. So there have been people in my past who I was like, I don't know if this person's ever gonna want to be or be able to be a lead guide, who have surprised me after a year or two. So you just never know. So unprecedented times call for creative measures. And so we have to be creative right now. And one thing I'm going to say is that people usually value time or money. So if there is a way or any place where you can give one of those or either of those, that can help, because the bottom line is people tend to value their freedom, their finances, and flexibility. And that's really big right now in particular. I call them the 3 Fs: freedom, finances, and flexibility. And you're probably like, well, how do we offer that in a school? I mean, that sounds like an instructional design job at a tech environment, because a lot of teachers right now are leaving for those kinds of jobs because they can work remotely, or they can, travel. They're not dealing with angry parents about masks or not masks and vaccinations and not. So there's a lot to contend with here. There's a lot to compete with right now as a brick and mortar school. Are you a school that is known to add lots of paperwork or add non-Montessori practices to your environment? Is there a way you can scale those things back and make your systems easier? Because then you will develop a reputation of like, this is the school where people want to come because they really get to teach according to their training, which is, what Montessori teachers really want. That's why they come to this pedagogy. But sometimes if you're in a public school in particular, you have to adhere to standards and certain kinds of practices that you may not necessarily want to, but have to. But there still may be a way to streamline that stuff and make it simpler for them. Is there ways that you can offer unpaid time? I know that a lot of people can't do paid time, but it's an option. Some people will be happy to have some unpaid time if there's some flexibility for somebody to jump in with them. People don't often realize that unpaid time off can also be a valuable perk. Do you have planning time for teachers? A couple of hours on a Friday afternoon while an assistant is monitoring the classroom or offering enrichment can be helpful. Another thing you might want to consider, I know those of you who have early childhood often are open from like 7 to 6 or something like that. It's really can be really tricky to staff that sometimes. But is there a way you could have your assistant teachers work the same hours as your lead teachers and then have a separate aftercare staff that comes in at noon, for example, and they maybe work noon to 6 or 1 to 6, and they are giving breaks and whatnot? Because a lot of assistant teachers work 8 hours with the children. It's a long day. And many assistants leave after a year or two because they don't have that like collaboration time with leads. Sometimes it's not built into your system or your structure. and they need to have some non-child facing task time in order to sort of have breathing room. Are you interested in the development of your staff, and do you offer opportunities for them to go to conferences, participate in professional developments of their choosing and all of that? Because they want to know that you may have your own expectations of what you need from them, and that's reasonable for you to have, right? Like you're like, these are our expectations at our school, we have performance evaluations and whatnot, but they also want to know that you are growing them as a person and you're interested in them as a person and their personal growth. And that is going to go a long way if you have those PDs that they can choose. And this doesn't mean that when you have a professional development day that you are like doing a lot of in-house stuff and then they don't have time to go work in their classrooms. Make sure they have some of that too. And these are things you want to tell them what we have professional development days, or we have days where you can work in your classroom. Let them know what those things are that you have to offer. Maybe at your school, you could shorten your hours at the beginning or the end of the day. Some schools I know have done that because of low staffing. If you are chronically understaffed and it's at a crisis point, maybe you're open from 7:30 to 5:30 instead of 7 to 6, or 8 to 5 instead of 7:30 to 5:30, and just shaving off a little bit of time at the beginning and at the end can alleviate some of your staff challenges. That's something you could possibly do. Here's another really radical idea, but people are doing this all over the country. Have you considered having a 4-day school week? And this doesn't mean that only 4 days and the 5th day is closed. It could mean that, but you could have a 4-day school week and the 5th day could be sort of an optional outdoor enrichment day with an untrained guide. And then you can somehow have it so that people work 4-day school weeks. If you stagger it, I do know a few schools that have done that, have teachers working 4 days a week and they stagger the schedule as such. It can be done. It just takes a lot of creative thinking. As I said, schools are moving to 4-day weeks all over the country. Another thing you might want to do, not everyone loves doing this and nobody likes this, but it's the reality right now, is hiring untrained teachers and sending them to training. So you can definitely do that, especially these days. There are more training options that are more accessible than ever. As I mentioned earlier, I work with the Prepared Montessori Institute, and it's mostly online, and there's like a 2-week cohort. CGMS also does that. There are a few different online options that are wonderful, that they only have to go somewhere a couple of weeks during a summertime. It's affordable, it's accessible. So, there are ways to get them their certification that's much easier than in the olden days where they had to go travel somewhere and be there and relocate their whole lives for the summer. And, so those are some of my thoughts and ideas. And I know I kind of spoke at breakneck speed there because I wanted to get them all in. And now I wanted to just go through the chat and see what people have to say. And then maybe we can just sort of have questions, dialogue, problem solve, because I kind of see that this could be an opportunity for all these people in this room collectively to problem solve this challenge. Let's see, leveraging AI. Indeed.com does tailor to people's searches. It's true. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Shaza says, if I might share my expectation from my Montessori admin school, there can be a Google form asking a few situation-based questions, a video clip, and ask what the candidate would do in that situation, insightful questions and things like that. Yes, these are all good things related to what we're talking about. Okay, does anybody at this point have any questions, or I don't know if our moderators had any thoughts that came up as I was kind of talking through a long thing of that Instagram posting. Okay, yes, Facebook posting, Instagram posting. If you're into TikTok, I have to say I actually really like TikTok. I could get rid of all my other social medias today because I like TikTok that much, but I don't actually do anything on there. I just, I'm a consumer, not a producer on TikTok. So, but you use your social media for leverage and not exactly, no, not a TikTok influencer. Use social media, particularly if you're, your parents. I always, in my last couple of years as a head of school, I was telling my friend, gosh, the parents are getting younger and younger every year, but no, it's actually me getting older and older. The parents now are the millennial era, and they love social media and they love Instagram. If you don't have an ability or a capacity to be on there and using those platforms, you need to hire somebody who will. And you can hire a 20-year-old part-time to do something like that. Or I think actually we're with some people who are going to help you with that. To think who can do a much better job in terms of like really getting your name out there. So yeah, we are here with our Nido Marketing folks who can totally help that out. So there's lots of different ways. Do you guys go onto Instagram for people? Do you guys do social media posting and things like that? Maybe can you guys tell me a little bit about what you do with that stuff? Because I need to hear it, because I want to make sure I knew. I know you have your host of things, but I wasn't sure if jumping into Instagram was like where you were at.
Yeah, we do. Primarily our focus obviously has been on recruiting students. So we offer both Google ads and Facebook and Instagram ads for that purpose. So we basically will manage, create the ads, run them for you. You tell us, what you're looking for, and we create the campaigns and do all of that for you. We're also, and I think I saw, we're just going to start doing some Facebook and Instagram job postings for some clients. So we're starting to experiment with that. I don't have a lot to report at this point, but it's definitely a platform that has a lot of potential. I haven't looked into TikTok, but somebody else, Matt Hillis, who's our co-founder, said he's had a lot of luck connecting with prospective parents on TikTok as well. So that's definitely a platform that we have on our list to investigate, but we haven't. That would be Camilla's.
Yeah, so as community manager here, I run all of our Nido Marketing and Montessori Thrive social profiles, and I love just like observing trends online. And I think that first of all, if you have a job posting, it really does not hurt to post it on your Instagram, Facebook, or wherever. It's free to do. My main advice for anyone who has a social media account is to firstly make sure that it really correlates with your brand, your school, and Montessori. I see this, I see it happen sometimes. Most of the time, I feel like now schools have a really good idea of how important aesthetics are in the social media space, whether you're creating videos, whether you're creating an Instagram account, but just make sure you're posting nice pictures. It's all Montessori related content, and it just ties in with your branding. And I love that Letty brought up TikTok, because I think that it's definitely going to be a space where Montessorians can kind of not only spread awareness for Montessori in general, but use it as a platform to recruit. I know they just announced earlier this week that they're going to be expanding into 10-minute long videos as their new maximum. So imagine the potential of that for parenting courses or things like that, or just many parenting support videos for your parents, as well as just recruiting Montessorians, telling them about maybe if you're willing to sponsor their learning or their training as Montessori guides, if you can get that out there on social media platforms, I think it's amazing. So definitely look into that. It's pretty easy to produce. You don't need to have a fancy camera. You can use it on a smartphone. So once you get the hang of it, it's great. And if you want to hire someone young part-time, I think that's a great way to save you time and stress. Chances are they're already familiar with the app as consumers. It's not that hard to make the jump from being a consumer to actually creating content. So I think it'll be fun to see how Montessori grows into that space. I see a lot of content creators in the Montessori space. So it's definitely a place to look at.
Absolutely. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or they want to do any brainstorming about, because I wanted to give a little bit of time for that and sort of.
Letty, I have a comment, Letty.
Yes.
Thank you for a nice presentation. I think you made some very good points in terms of how we can increase the odds of attracting the teachers that may be coming our way. My experience, what I've seen is that it has been a teacher's market always. Pandemic has made it worse, and I'm basically focusing on AMI. I'm not focusing on other, but primarily AMI. And the difficulty I have is that all of these things that you suggested can be done, one in terms of interviews and proposing what the school has to offer and all that kind of stuff, is in case if somebody even applies to your ads. We have applied to AMI, we have contacted all training institutes, and guess what? Not a single response. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. I'm saying that this has happened. So this is the problem, is such an extreme shortage of teachers that aren't even there to get around. You can't even get them to take a bite before you have any chance to present your case. So this is basically the frustration that I think that we have from our side.
Well, I completely understand that. So I have AMI training, and I worked at schools where we were having AMI, we needed AMI trained guides as well. So that is an especially difficult challenge right now. And you're right, it always is. I think the thing that's different right now is that it's even hard to find assistant teachers. Like, I mean, at least in the olden days, you're like, okay, I can find those guys. I might not be able to find the trained teachers, but if you are at an AMI school, you really have to be strategic about hiring people who you are sending to training and having them and paying for it yourself. Like, I have racked my brain around that particular situation. And there are really no other options other than putting your advertisements out there. But anybody who has AMI training has seen at least one of your advertisements probably. It's that you are going to have to send them to training. And they do have an AMI training in Texas, Mint, that is it's a very hybrid program. So it could be mostly online, and that could help out with the whole issue of getting them where they need to be. But definitely it's about hiring the people who have the right personality characteristics that you want in your school community and paying to send them to AMI training. And that could be you send them for a year and just don't see them for a year. They'll get done faster that way. Or you do the 3 summer model. And if you're AMI accredited, I don't know if they could be a lead guide yet, but they could be an assistant guide. But it's just tricky right now. And I don't know if they have, as an organization, loosened the requirements right now for the pandemic or not, but in terms of accreditation status, but it's tricky.
At least 3 or 4 of our teachers basically came because we sponsored them. So that's how we got it. And the difficulty it becomes in terms of sponsoring them is that it's typically like a summer program, it's a 3-year program. So if I'm looking for a teacher now, and all of a sudden, teacher decided to retire, right? She says not coming back. Now I'm in a pickle here. I have to get somebody this coming fall. I can't, this 3-year program to train is not going to help me. Sometimes what is happening is talk about getting a good fit. We're so desperate that we'll take anybody who can walk, say hello. I mean, that's how desperate one is.
Well, that's
for-
the challenge. I mean, I at one point when I was early in my career was like, okay, this person has a Montessori diploma. They have anyone, yay. Oh my goodness, this reference doesn't say that this reference says they're an organized person, but says absolutely nothing about how they relate to children at all. That's a red flag.
Yep.
And I could tell, I'm like, sometimes I'd interview somebody twice and I'm trying to get a square peg in a round hole to fit. And the answer is, if you can be flexible and maybe look at other training options, if you're not an AMI accredited school, or you grow your own. And so even if you've sent your teachers, well, I think you just need to think ahead of the game and like, okay, I've sent my teachers to AMI training. I'm going to send 2 assistants to AMI training so that they have their training by the time these guys I'm going to lose at least one of these in the next few years. So I'm going to start right now with these assistant teachers and start sending them to training. And after 3 summers, maybe you'll stagger 2 of them. You'll start one summer, you'll start one the next summer. And, sure enough, eventually they'll have their training. And then you might have an extra, you're putting the investment in ahead of time when you don't need it yet, but it'll help in the long run when you do need it. Anybody else have any questions or wonderings?
Christine is raising her hand in the corner. If you want to unmute
Christine.
yourself.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. It's on your blind so yeah, okay, now I see it. Okay.
Thank you for taking my question, and bear with me. I am very new to administration. I was an AMI elementary and adolescent teacher for many, many years. Just moved into mentoring and coaching, and now I am the director of the school. So one of the things, we are sending people to training, and we're doing it in such that these hybrid programs allow them to teach in the morning and train in the afternoon. It's not ideal. It's not what we would like, but it is keeping us going. But we have such a shortage of assistant teachers that the entire school is stressed. And what we're finding is we were competitive with the local market on what we were offering to start. We are having to raise that enough that brand new teachers that are still in training, what they're getting for a salary and what assistants are getting, that gap is very, very narrow now. And how do you deal with that? I mean, assistants are vital to the class. We need them. The class flows better with them. At the same time, they don't have nearly the responsibility that a teacher has. We do pretty good with benefits for all of our employees. So there's not a huge gap in teacher benefits from assistant. I don't know how in a school that's still not fully recovered enrollment wise from COVID, and we're spending a lot of resources sending people to training. We can't afford to bring the teacher salary up to make a bigger gap. Is anyone else running into the same problems?
I think everybody is. And I have depressing solutions to that, I guess, because, I've been over it with so many people. And either our government needs to subsidize childcare to some degree to support this situation, or B, you guys need to pay everybody more, which isn't always an option, or C, you need to increase the tuition for the parents so that you can pay the teachers what they need to be paid. And that's hard too. I mean, some people I know have instituted sort of a sliding tuition scale so that, there's people who can pay more are paying a much higher rate, and people who can't are paying a lower rate, or just having an across the board higher tuition and then offering a more robust scholarship funding. And, it's really challenging. And I do think that we are at a crisis in this country, and something's going to have to be done at some point to make it better. Because especially before I was in North Carolina, I was in California. And, rental and housing and residential expenses are astronomical there. So paying for your building, I mean, personnel is expensive as it is, but like paying for buildings there is just, it's not easily doable. So there are no perfect solutions. All there are some creative things you can do. I mean, maybe you can't pay some people more, but maybe you can have them work a little bit like a little bit less hours and they still get paid the same, or you can have them have some non-student facing time. But then even pulling them in, I know is hard because, they would rather do Grubhub or DoorDash sometimes, where, I actually had a man from TaskRabbit at my house helping me with my furniture. And he's like, I used to work at Domino's. I don't want to do that. I have to go there. I have cranky colleagues. I have a boss, and now I can just set my own hours and whatnot. So we're going to have to make it more attractive. And like the only solution really is to pay the teachers more or give them more time off, like money or time. But then where does that money come from? And that's why my hope is that at some point there is some more subsidization of childcare from, local or federal governments to offset the cost. I mean, they do it in Canada, they do it in lots of other countries. So I suspect that we're at the breaking point, though, in our profession where it's going to be hard.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so, a couple of comments here in the chat. Can training institutes be the eyes and ears for schools who are willing to make a liaison with a training center and identify good students who perform well? Well, let me just tell you an interesting thing. I am in a training center right now, and there's nobody in who's joining training these days who's like, oh, I want to be a Montessori teacher. I'm just going to join the training and then find a job later on. It's not like that anymore. When I took training, it was that way. People are like, I'm interested in Montessori. I'm going to take my training. Oh, and then I'll just find a job. I'd say 95% of the people who are in the Prepared Montessorian one that I'm involved in are being sent from other schools already. So they already have jobs. So that's the thing, you need to find people and bring them in. And so, catching them when they're fresh out of college and getting them going would be a great thing. There are some schools, some training centers that are connected to universities. There's one in Connecticut that is right now, I believe. So you're going to need to really connect with, definitely making some liaison with training centers is a great idea. But I don't know that they're going to be able to provide you with students right now, because most schools are holding on to the ones that they have pretty tightly. So, and the interesting thing too is like, in training, I am with the Prepared Montessorian, but I also have been with CGMS with their administrative course. And what we've seen across the board is, since the pandemic, and particularly, people are just not performing as well as students right now. So that's not, somebody said, oh, can you see like who's performing well? And it's a tricky thing right now. Peter talks about market forces. You're right. I mean, we do live in a capitalist society, supply and demand. And right now we have a high demand for teachers and the supply is low. Has anyone raised tuition across the board? Okay, I just want to say this right now. A lot of people are afraid of raising the tuition because you think you're going to lose your families. Let me just tell you that that's most of the time not going to happen, because all of the childcare centers, the schools near you, many of them have closed or are closing. There are wait lists. So in a way, even though you have a dearth of teachers, you should have more students coming to you pretty soon from sadly enough schools closing. And So you can raise your tuition and you're probably going to be okay. And they may not love it. Nobody likes to get their bill increased, right? But if you explain, like, we need to be able to pay our teachers well and have them be happy. Like, I don't know any parent who would hear that and say, like, oh, I don't want my beloved child's teacher to not be making a living wage. So, explaining that to them is a way to do it. And now that it's March, I mean, if you are thinking about raising tuition for next year, like in the next month or two is the time to do it so that they can get used to that idea. And don't do this thing where you get them to promise enrollment for next year and then you raise the tuition, because that's going to make them mad. And that's going to cause a backfire. So being honest and authentic is really important. Let's see in here, Montessorians need to stay on their toes if there will be free pre-K or other government support for preschool. Well, my hope is that government help could also help what's existing already. So let's hope that that's the case. As a charter school, we are finding the current research-based and data-driven requirements are demanding new Montessori research specifically targeted at new requirements. It's tricky when you're working in a public school setting, because I am working with a charter school and marrying, what we try to do in Montessori with the requirements and the accountability measures of the state can be really challenging. Yes, it was generally well. Yes. So Sarah's saying that she did raise tuition and it was fairly well received by parents. And they do understand the changing market. They see it everywhere right now. Everything's going up right now. So if you're going to raise it, actually, I wouldn't wait till the next year. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but everything's kind of going up right now. So they're going to be like, yep, okay, things are going up right now. And you want to really think about how much you're going to increase that too. You want to be really strategic and mindful about how you choose to structure that. Somebody's currently looking to send out a letter, but struggling with the context. Montessorians have a really hard time asking for money, I think. A lot of times asking for money from parents or things like that, or even as a staff person asking for money. I mean, it's challenging, but you just have to think that you want to pay your teachers well, you want to keep your doors open, and you want to offer a quality program. And in order to do that, it needs more funding. Probably your electric bills are higher now because the electricity is going up. If you're doing snack, your food bills have gotten higher. Everything's getting higher. So you're going to have to also do that. And you're not going to raise it to some exorbitant amount that is crazy, but you want to raise it enough to where you can do the things you need to do to keep your staff happy, because otherwise they're going to leave and then you have to spend money hiring them or time and invest all of that, and that gets expensive. Let's see, and Laura's saying that they've raised tuition beyond the COLA increase, which you typically don't do. Explain that we adjusted staff wages to meet the market's hiring demands. How did that go, Laura? Do you think was that well received? If you want to talk, I know we have everybody like dropping in the chat right now. Or maybe she can't. Some people are in positions where they can't talk, but if she comes on at some point and wants to respond to that, awesome. Yes, and is there anybody else who's raised their tuition and that it was pretty well received and you want to share a little bit about how that went? Feel free to unmute yourself.
We raised, Knoxville Montessori School raised theirs 5%, and we had 0 complaints. Not a single person said anything about not being happy with the fact that we were doing that. We've had more complaints about wearing masks in the school than we have about tuition increase. So that's a good thing.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jillian. And Sarah says they raised their tuition 15% this year, and she puts an exclamation point, knowing that that's a lot. But it sounds like they hadn't done that for a while, and it was way overdue. And they lost about as many students as normal. So that sounds good. Then somebody drops in trust for learning. I don't know what that is, Shaza. Did you want to explain that? And if not, that's okay. Not everybody is, I know you're all like, some of you are in schools and not everybody can speak right now. Okay, oh, this is a great idea here that Michelle has. We have developed a relationship with a local tech high school that allows interns to work for us in their shop weeks. High school students have been hired in at a lower pay rate and can allow the lead guides to step out of the classrooms here and there, do rest time, aftercare, and et cetera. And that gives the leads extra planning and prep time. So connecting with a high school or a college, if you have a university nearby, most students in the US are eligible, well, students in financial aid are eligible for what's called a work study program. And with the work, if you apply to be a part of the work study program, the government pays half of the wage and you pay half of the wage. And so the limiting factor is that they can't work in the summer because it's only during a school year kind of a scenario, but it might be like something worth looking into your local university to see if they have federal work study program job board. Most of them do. I actually, when I was in high school, or at college, I did some work study work with a recreation program, and that was really helpful. So, because college students also are people who need that, and they're a little bit more mature than high school students, but there's a lot of very mature high school students out there too. And Madeline says they raise it 3 to 5% every year. Yes, you're welcome, Christine, for logging off there. So anybody else want to share about raising their tuition? I'm just curious to see if there's anybody else who wanted to share about how that went.
I can share. We usually just raise our tuition every other year, and like the other person said, 3 to 5%, sometimes more, depending on what we think we need to do. But that has helped a lot, and we don't get complaints. We haven't had any parents complain, and I don't think anyone's left because we raised our rates.
Yeah, I mean, they especially like, right now their children, children are going through a lot and they're very fragile. And parents are not going to want to be moving their kids in a huff because the tuition went up. They want their kids to be somewhere stable, consistent, and loving. And if you're offering that to them right now and they already feel that, they are not, it's not going to be a deal breaker. I mean, maybe you have a parent or two who's on the edge and they're talking about leaving anyway, and this could push them over the edge. But maybe there's somebody who needs to go anyway to open the door to bring in a different community member who is really a good fit for your community. I'm seeing here somebody else, Elizabeth says they raised their tuition to 4% across the board and no one said anything. And Dawn says increased tuition by 10%, sending a letter explaining rising costs and have not lost anyone. And they haven't even had anyone question it. So this is good news, everybody. For those of you who have not raised your tuition, this is good news to see that it is definitely a possibility and that it's going well. I don't see anybody in here who said they did it and like it was a devastating blow to their community. The worst I see here is a couple people were gone, but they lose a couple people every year anyway. So this is good news. And I'm seeing a range of anywhere between 5 and 10%. And so that can be, maybe a guide for you. Well, so that's pretty much, I mean, we're almost at the half hour mark here. So I don't know if Camille or Camila, I love how you guys' names are almost the same, have anything additional to add to the conversation. They're great folks here, and I think they offer lots of supportive things as well. So take it away, one of you.
Yeah, before we wrap up, I just want to say that I'm really happy that you mentioned reaching out to high schools and to colleges, because we had a town hall a few weeks or months back about Montessori awareness. And I think that very much today, staffing is more about creating an awareness and getting people interested in Montessori early on, because what seems to be happening a lot, and whenever I see a complaint or a worry on a Facebook group about staffing, it's always, oh, we have a lead teacher who's been with us for so many years, who's, they've burnt out, they're leaving because these past 2 years have been, extremely difficult. And now we can't find anyone with the training. And the reality is, at that point, it becomes so much more difficult. You have to start planting your seeds so much earlier and just trying to find that talent, younger talent, and inspiring them and supporting them in the ways that you can. So I think that while it's great to be advertising your job openings, it's great to be posting on as many different platforms as you can, you also need to be doing a lot of inspiring and awareness work in the Montessori space if you want to make this easier for yourself in the future. It's very much a long game, it seems like. And the payoff is so much greater when you're able to support and train staff from an early age. You're going to get somebody who might be able to work with you longer, who might be able to work up the ranks from assistant to lead guide to maybe even head of school in the future when you need a replacement and it's your turn to retire. So thinking about those things long term.
Oh, and I have something to add to that too, real quick.
Yes, please do, Letty, please do.
And don't dismiss the career changer, the midlife career changer. I have had some amazing, sometimes you might want to have parents, maybe you have the parents who are interested in Montessori and they might want to go to training and teach at your school, or even like people in retirement. People are coming out of retirement to work in classrooms these days. And so, you may have some seasoned Montessorians who are at home who are like, hey, can you sub for us? Or can you work part-time and job share with this person who's having a baby, And so there are other options with, people in unconventional situations as well.
100%. So many parents can make great guides. I know a lot of people take that road. All right, so we're wrapping up now. We're 1 minute away from the hour. So I just want to thank Letty so much for joining us and sharing her valuable time and wisdom. This was a much needed topic of conversation. If you have any other questions that come to you later, please, drop them in our Facebook group. We're happy to answer them and exchange more ideas there. Next week, we're going to be joined by Cheney from Schools of Excellence. She came last month. She was great. So if anyone wants to join us, we'll be back at the same time next week. I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday and a wonderful Friday. And thank you again, Letty, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was really nice to be here. See you all in the Montessori world somewhere.
Have a great week, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.